Hello, and welcome to No Bullsh Business with me, Jacqueline. I am excited about my topic today because it's so important for people living in the B2B space and for direct-to-consumer business leaders. And I feel uniquely suited to talk about it. And this is making your business ready for millennial decision makers, and then eventually for Gen Z decision makers. But especially now, most pressing is millennial decision makers. So, who do we consider a millennial? A millennial is anyone between the age, as of right now, of about 26 to 40. They now occupy, fun fact, in 2021, 73%, so a majority of the decision-making roles at our businesses here in the US. As you know, how time works and aging works, this number should only increase over the next few years. And it's a huge shift because not only are we going from a generation to a younger generation as we have in the past, but we are now dealing with a generation that grew up or became a professional in a totally different time from their predecessors. So the way that we think about communicating with them, how they approach technology, and what their expectations are totally different from anything we've really seen before. And why am I uniquely suited to talk about it? Well, I happen to sit right on the cusp of the millennial generation, and I am young enough to understand Gen Z a bit more than my older millennials out there, but I am a millennial. I grew up at a really interesting time where, iPhones didn't exist yet, dial-up was still the thing, and I kind of saw how everything transformed, and I can understand, the assumptions that the older generations may have, and I can also very much relate to the millennial and Gen Z assumptions. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. And if you are a business owner, a salesperson, a sales director, a marketer, a marketing leader, or just a consumer who wants to be educated about this, stay tuned to learn how to make your business ready for millennial and Gen Z decision makers. Okay, so to start, I'm going to make an argument that there are kind of two extremes in terms of the experience that you can have with a person from a sales perspective, from a sales cycle perspective. So there is the very hyper-personal experience, which is kind of what we've been used to for decades and decades now. This is wherein you have to call to talk to a representative to learn about a product. You have to go into the store. Remember when we had to go into Best Buy to learn about televisions instead of just Googling them? There is a salesperson. Your experience as a decision maker, especially within the business realm, is almost entirely based off of this relationship that you have with a representative of the business. Then on the other end, we have the super impersonal experience, which I think most baby boomers and the like believe that millennials and Gen Z people want. So this is, you go onto a website, it feels very transactional. There's like nothing to read. no reviews, no information. It really is just kind of like a point and click and purchase, and that's it. So we have these two extremes. One in which you have to speak to a human, and you have to have that kind of sales process that makes you feel vulnerable, and that person is really in charge of educating you and moving you through the buyer cycle. And then there's this side where you can't get in touch with a human. You don't really have much information. You're just sort of in a very kind of transactional relationship. I'm going to argue that somewhere between these, we have the great process for millennials, and then later on for Gen Z decision makers. And this is why. Okay, so when we're talking about the hyper-personalized approach, which is kind of the older realm of things, there are a few things that frustrate millennials with this process. The first is it feels like a waste of time. It feels like a waste of time because we are used to making decisions before we make a decision, if that makes sense. So, for example, we do a lot of research online. Most people do now, before making any kind of purchasing decision or any kind of time commitment. So to have to call or meet someone in person before having already kind of qualified top contenders for, let's say, a business software or a piece of machinery that you're buying, or even a dress, is very frustrating from the perspective of someone who is used to doing a lot of upfront research. So we want to learn as much as possible before we make any kind of time commitment. That's number one. The second is it's very frustrating in the quick and resource-heavy, education-heavy world that we live in to have to be on someone else's schedule. So what I mean by that is, like in the first point, it's frustrating to have to be waiting around or wait for a specific day and time to start getting information about a product. We want the information now, unless it's absolutely something that another person has to tell us. The third thing is, and again, these are all kind of related, talking to someone one-on-one is an invasive way to get initial information, or as a first or second touch point. It sounds crazy, but people who didn't grow up talking on the phone as much can feel like it's an aggressive thing to have to speak on the phone with or meet with someone in real life, IRL, before they have felt comfortable with the company or the brand in advance. I know these are really difficult things to wrap your head around. I had a sales call recently where someone said, no one wants to pick up the phone anymore. And, it can be positive or negative, but at the end of the day, it's just the truth. So this is what's wrong with the hyper-personalized approach. With the impersonal digital approach, there are also problems. The first is usually there's no educational content, there's no personalized content, and as a millennial, and especially Gen Z, we're used to having endless information at our fingertips, right? So it's really important to understand that a lot of the times those initial buying decisions or time buy-in decisions for millennials when they're making a decision about whether to consider a company a piece of software, etc., is those decisions are led by IQ instead of EQ. So what that means is, whereas in the hyper-personalized approach, you kind of rely on the salesperson to really kind of bolster you and get you on board with their product. We rely on information that already exists on the internet, and our own self-education, or IQ, at least upfront, to get in the door on a decision. So again, having a lot of information allows this group to feel more trusting. If you have no information about your company or products online, or it's very scant, it can feel suspicious to a millennial or a Gen Z person who wants to see the proof and who wants to understand deeply before speaking to you. Okay, so second thing, with this impersonal digital experience, the relationship between the decision maker and the company can feel very transactional and very commercialized. And I know you must be thinking, well, when no person is involved, of course it feels impersonal and transactional. But there is a way to make your web presence such that you make it seem, or make the decision maker feel like you care about their thoughts and like you're carrying them through the process. And that's by courting people, courting decision makers, courting buyers, and feeding them specific information online. So if I come to your website and I'm interested in buying a t-shirt press for my merchandise company, and I opt in to get more information about this, you should not just be calling me, which makes me feel invaded as a millennial. You should also be sending me information via email about the specific product, about problems that I, as a decision maker buying the specific item, might face, offering me assistance after I've had time to learn about this specific product, and really kind of being there and feeding me that specific information. In conjunction with a normal sales process where at some point I can speak to a human, but I have all this information fed to me first. Okay, the third problem with an impersonal digital experience is typically that there are no case stories or reviews about the company or the product, and this again goes with information. The more that I can find about your company or product online, the better. And I would say not only on your website, so on your website you should have case studies, you should have reviews, whatever is more appropriate for your brand. But I love when I can go on YouTube or when I can Google a product and I see that people have created videos about how much they love the product. They are talking about it on Reddit, and there are ways to encourage people to talk about your product or service or whatever it is on these platforms. And I think that that's a killer way to really build trust with a consumer before they ever even talk to you. So that is important. So this kind of gets us to, what do millennials and Gen Z decision makers want, which is the purpose of the video. And I would say it's something between these two. So it's a personalized digital experience, wherein you have all the benefits of this personalized approach where the salesperson can tell what you want specifically. I want the web presence to tell me what I want specifically. And I want to be able to kind of access it from this, back seat perspective where I don't have to meet you in person, I don't have to call you. But then I like the option to be able to speak to a human as well. So let me break this down a little bit. First priority is create content galore, as I'm saying. Your digital presence should have educational content up the wazoo. You should be helping people understand what your values and your morals are, why you made your product, how to walk through the decision-making process for the product. So for example, if you're selling me a piece of software for project management, can you tell me how that software is different from all of the other software on the market, and why I should make this decision and how I should make this decision? And maybe even be so honest that you tell me why your product might not be good for me. Answer common objections, and then just really make it so that I can rely on your web presence almost as much as I can rely on a person telling me about your product. The second is making sure, and this goes along with it, making sure your website is like a sales representative for you. So it's almost like I come to your website, and the website, sometimes there are websites that feel like you have to already know the brand to be on it, which is really frustrating. Or you have no idea where to look, is another way to put it. A great website helps people walk through the decision-making process. So it's really clear how to engage with your site as a first-time customer. Where should I go? What should I learn? You can even speak to the customer in the copy. Hey, new here? Start with this, read this, then do this. Are you a returning customer? Come to this part of the website. That kind of guidance, again, feels really personal. It feels like you're being guided through the process without even having to deploy a person to help guide you through the process. Third, as I've said, showcase real people, stories, reviews as much as you can. It's super helpful both for B2B and consumer products. Super important. Fourth, especially, I think this is a really good pointer for both companies that use a sales representative process and companies that don't, using personalized emails and texts. So once you know a decision maker is interested in your product or brand, feed them information that is specific to what they need. So if you have a product line of 50 products and you know that this decision maker is interested in one of those products, please don't send them information about every single product you have. Make sure that the information is tailored to their needs and that you're speaking to them specifically. And I think that goes a long way, because not only does it educate people about your brand, it makes them feel supported, and it makes them feel like you're high tech and you're a smart company because you've taken the time to put into place these specific things. Okay, last but not least, as I mentioned a little bit before, make sure that there is the ability to speak with a human if desired. So even if it's just an online chat or an email address, it does really help if let's say I'm 90% of the way or 95% of the way to making my decision, and I have just one more question, I can't find the answer anywhere online. I do want to be able to ask a person. And of course, there are certain situations where people will want to speak with a sales representative no matter what. But this is kind of speaking from a software perspective, let's say. If you have no person to talk to, it makes me nervous that down the line, if I have an issue with your product, I'm not going to be able to reach anyone. And that's important. So kind of understanding where to put in that actual person touch point for your specific product or brand is important. And I think that the person can be introduced early on when someone opts in and starts getting those personalized messages on email or text message, or they can just be there for extra support. Again, depending on what your product or service is specifically. Okay, and now finally, I'm going to go on a useful side tangent. So I would think about talking to or working with millennial or Gen Z decision makers the same way I think about Gen Z and millennial dating. So listen to me, stay with me. If you go on, or if you talk to a millennial, let's say someone who's 25, about how they are dating, usually this is what happens. And this is very akin to the business cycle and how I think that millennial decision makers and then Gen Z decision makers will start thinking about purchasing products for their companies and purchasing their direct-to-consumer content as well, direct-to-consumer products as well. So if I'm a millennial, I'm dating, let's say I have the app Tinder, and I am swiping through potential dates. I make really quick decisions. These 5 guys are not for me. These 2 guys, they're potential candidates to date me, millennial person. And then I have these 2 people. I know their background information from Tinder. And before I ever meet up with these 2 people, I have already searched them on Instagram. I've searched their Facebooks. I probably know what sports they played in high school. Way too much information. And that's because the internet has a lot of information. And when you're making a decision, if you can't find any information about the guy or gal that you're going on a date with online, from a millennial perspective, that's a little bit shady. Like, is this person real? Why can't I find anything about them? I don't know. I can't verify where they're from. I can't verify their name. I can't verify who their friends are, etc. That is a big risk. I might still go on the date if they're very attractive, let's say, but it's scary. It kind of gives me bad vibes. So, same thing when you're making a decision for business. I want to know everything, almost everything, have a lot of assumptions that this is the right thing for me before I ever actually meet the company or talk to the representative. So funny side tangent, hopefully that was helpful. And then one last note, this is important for millennials, but I think even more for Gen Z. Values and integrity are very, very important in a way that I think they haven't been in the past. I think that millennials, but especially Gen Z, let's say, are very, very picky about seeing their own values presented in whatever company they're doing business with, exchanging their money with, whether it's for their business or for themselves. What I mean by this is they want to see diversity. They want to see people of different body sizes and backgrounds and genders, etc. And they want to see that the company stands for something, a cause. And I just see this more and more and more amongst Gen Z specifically. And I think it can be that kind of like tipping point when someone's making a decision between X and Y. If you have, let's say, a green initiative, or I see that you're giving back to Chicago because your business is based in Chicago, that might, tip me over to the favor of one side. So something else to keep in mind when you're presenting your information to the newer or younger generations, having that kind of morality and backbone there, and then communicating it to them is also important. So let me know if you have any questions. This has been a doozy of a video, and make sure you subscribe and like this, and let me know if you think I missed anything, and what you think is important in selling or marketing to Millennial and Gen Z decision makers.